As night began to fall, the air grew colder and the fire crackled softly. That's when we heard the low, distant rumble of artillery. It was faint, barely noticeable at first, but then it grew louder, rolling over the fields like thunder. The air grew tense, and the reality of the situation settled over us like a heavy weight. The calm was over. The storm was about to begin. "Here they come," someone shouted, and I could see them now, emerging from the tree line in the distance. A vast, endless wave of infantry, Soviet soldiers marching forward with grim determination. Behind them, the ominous silhouettes of tanks and artillery pieces, moving slowly but surely, like predators stalking their prey. The day passed slowly, the sun sinking lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the village. I sat with a few of the others around a small fire, trying to enjoy what little food we had left. The conversation was light, forced almost, as we joked about home, about the girls we left behind, and the lives we would return to if we returned at all. But the laughter never reached our eyes. "Hold the line," I heard an officer scream, but it was futile. The line was breaking, and we all knew it. I fired again and again, but for every Soviet that fell, 2 more seemed to take his place. It was like trying to hold back a flood with a handful of sand. The enemy moved relentlessly, closing the distance between us with terrifying speed. Their tanks rolled forward, crushing everything in their path, their cannons spitting fire as they blasted away our defenses. I stood up, staring out into the darkness. The horizon seemed calm, but that calm wouldn't last. The Soviets were out there, moving closer with every passing moment. We were just soldiers, doing what we were told, but deep down, I think we all knew that the days ahead would be unlike anything we had faced before. "They're coming," someone muttered under their breath, and we all knew it was true. The morning came, but the sun seemed reluctant to rise. The sky was overcast, thick clouds hanging low, as if the world itself knew what was coming. We were up early, long before dawn, already in position. The officers had briefed us during the night the Soviets were close, closer than we had thought. They would be here by mid-morning, and we were to hold the line at all costs. Time seemed to crawl, the minutes dragging on endlessly. Then, just as the officers had said, the rumbling began again, low at first, like distant thunder, but growing louder with every second. Artillery, we all knew what that sound meant. The Soviets were preparing their assault. The Soviets were getting closer, too close. I could see their faces now, twisted with fury, their rifles raised as they charged toward our lines. Our machine guns were firing non-stop, mowing down scores of men, but it wasn't enough. Nothing seemed to stop them. In the chaos, men screamed, orders were shouted, and the ground shook with the impact of shells. A tank shell hit the trench a few meters to my left, sending a plume of fire and dirt into the air. The blast knocked me off my feet, my ears ringing from the explosion. I scrambled back to my feet, dazed, clutching my rifle like a lifeline. In that moment, fear gripped me like never before. I had been in battles before, had faced death many times, but this was different. This wasn't just a skirmish or a retreat. This was survival, pure and simple. If the Soviets overran us, there would be no mercy. We had heard the stories, knew what they did to prisoners. Surrender wasn't an option. The order came, and our machine guns roared to life, spitting fire and lead into the advancing Soviets. I took aim and fired, the recoil of my rifle jolting through my arms. The sound was deafening, the crack of rifles, the thudding of machine guns, the distant boom of artillery. But still, they came. Wave after wave of soldiers, as if the earth itself was pushing them toward us. And then, just as the Soviet infantry was nearly upon us, the order was given fall back. I took a deep breath, raising my rifle once more as the Soviets closed in, my mind racing. The air was thick with smoke, the acrid smell of gunpowder and burning flesh filling my lungs. Men were falling all around me, and the sound of battle was deafening, a cacophony of violence and chaos. I ran, my boots sinking into the mud as the sound of gunfire and explosions filled the air. We were being overrun, and there was no time to think, only time to run. The summer of 1944 was unusually warm in the eastern Polish countryside. The fields stretched out like endless golden waves, gently swaying in the breeze under the relentless sun. For a moment, it was easy to forget the war. The small village where we were stationed felt quiet, almost peaceful, as if it existed in a world apart from the violence that had ravaged Europe for years. But that peace was a lie. We all knew what was coming. I stood at the edge of the village, looking out over the rolling fields. The horizon blurred with heat, but in the distance, I could see the faint outline of a forest. Beyond that, somewhere, were the Soviets, an unstoppable tide. We had heard rumors of their numbers, of their ferocity, and of their brutal treatment of prisoners. Those thoughts weighed on us all, though no one dared speak of it aloud. Our unit had been positioned here for weeks, digging trenches, reinforcing old buildings, and setting up defensive lines. The Soviets were close, too close. The distant rumbles of artillery echoed across the plains, a constant reminder of the storm building just beyond the horizon. They were coming, and there was nothing we could do but wait. I found myself walking through the trenches we had carved out in the earth, watching my comrades. Some were busy, focused on their tasks, while others sat with far-off looks in their eyes, lost in thought. We were all tired, worn out by years of fighting, and there was a sense of unease that hung in the air. Some of the younger soldiers, fresh replacements from Germany, still had a bit of hope in their eyes, but the veterans like me, we knew better. Life here had settled into a routine of preparation. In the mornings we were up early, checking our rifles, running drills, and going over maps with the officers. In the afternoons we dug deeper into the earth, setting up more sandbags and preparing for the inevitable. There wasn't much else to do but work and think. And thinking, well, that was dangerous. The quiet moments were the hardest because in those moments, your mind drifted to places you didn't want it to go. The war wasn't going well. That much was clear. The news from the front lines had been bad for months, and the Soviet advance was relentless. We heard stories of whole divisions being wiped out, of entire towns falling in days. Yet here we were, dug in and waiting, like lambs waiting for the wolves. The trenches were cold and damp from the night's dew. The earth beneath our feet turned to thick mud. I could see my breath in the early morning chill as I huddled in my position, rifle in hand, waiting. The silence was unnerving. Every small sound seemed amplified: the soft rustle of leaves in the wind, the distant caw of a crow, the muffled shifting of gear from the men beside me. But beyond that, there was nothing. No birdsong, no animals, just the waiting. We had spent the night reinforcing our positions, laying down barbed wire, setting up machine gun nests, and stockpiling ammunition. The village behind us was quiet now, its few remaining civilians having fled days earlier. All that remained was the skeleton of a place once full of life, its buildings scarred from the war that had already passed through so many times before. The first shells landed far from our position, deep in the fields beyond the forest. But soon, they began to creep closer, each impact shaking the ground beneath us. Dirt and debris flew into the air, raining down over the trenches. I ducked instinctively as a shell landed only meters away, sending a cloud of earth and smoke into the sky. My heart raced, pounding in my chest like a drum. The battle was beginning. Relief washed over me for a brief second, but it was short-lived. The retreat would be just as deadly as the fight. We scrambled out of the trenches, racing toward the village behind us. It was every man for himself now. The line had broken, and the Soviets were pouring through the gaps, relentless in their pursuit.